change my view. There we go. So anyway, welcome to Andy Wallis, who, as you'll all know, has headed up the Salisbury River Park project and is going to talk to us about that and about flooding and issues of that nature, which are all too topical at the moment. It's very dear to my heart because I'm just up the road from it, and in Salisbury, lots of our things are called five rivers, so we can't ever forget that we've got five rivers which could all flood. And indeed, when I went to school, my school badge was Five Rivers, and our school song was Silver Yet the Five Streams Flow, and they're certainly flowing at the moment. And I'm really enjoying the new river park layout and cycling past in the moonlight and seeing the fish ladder, as it were, going up. And it's a really magnificent spectacle, really restoring the river to a thing of more significance than something between two rather channeled areas next to the car park. So I'm really happy, Andy, with what you've done. But please do there's been moaners and groaners, as there always are down here. I think there are everywhere. But it's an amazing project, both for defending us from flooding in the town and also from the point of view of increasing areas for wildlife and allowing the river to express itself more naturally, I think. So I'll hand over to you and turn myself onto mute in case my phone rings. So please show us what you've got to show us, Andy, and welcome.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, thanks, Claire. I will first of all just check that my screen does share properly, and then
your presentation open as well. If hopefully won't be needed. It's a lovely presentation, all pictures. I hope we'll have just a few numbers as well, though. I'm a sort of engineer type and like to hear about that sort of thing.
let me should hopefully that is now. Hopefully that is now on your screen, as someone could confirm, but I'll assume it's sharing unless someone says otherwise.
That's perfect.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, thank you for the introduction there, Claire. Just very briefly about myself. First and foremost, I'm a Wiltshire resident as well. Been living here for quite a long time. I'm a civil engineer by background. I've spent all my 30 odd years working in or around rivers one way or another. I do basically build things for a living, but pretty much everything I build is of environmental nature one way or another. And yeah, mostly involves splashing around water one way or another. And yeah, I've been very fortunate to be involved in the River Park project in Salisbury for quite a number of years now. I will just sort of bit of a whistle stop tour. I realize we haven't got that long, and I'll probably won't cover everything you want to talk about, but hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions and everything at the end. Key one there, just dwelling on the first slide here, is just to point out. So I'm effectively working for the Environment Agency on this, but it's very much a joint project with Wiltshire Council, Salisbury City Council as well. And that's important, and I'll explain why that's important as we go through. Just listing some of our funding partners on the bottom there as well. And again, that's important. It's funded by a whole suite of different people, and without that, we wouldn't be able to do the scheme. So why are we doing the work there? Why do we do it? So as Claire mentioned before, Salisbury has lots of rivers. Salisbury floods. Yes, no shock to anyone there. So the scheme is about reducing flooding. This is the last time we had really big floods in Salisbury. Last time the cathedral flooded back in 1915, and we're long overdue another big flood. But we know normally cathedrals don't flood. They're normally built in. People knew what they were doing when they built cathedrals. Salisbury is a bit different and has flooded 8 times in its history, so we know it's at risk. But more recently, we've had various bits of flooding there as well, and crucially, all these photos were actually taken back in the 2014 floods, winter 13-14, big flood winter, where we had various issues happening around Salisbury, several properties flooded that we weren't expecting to flood. So we started to look at a scheme there. And initially we were just looking on our own for a bit of a scheme there. Realised we couldn't really do much on our own, so started to work with others. But this is back to the flood risk. This is again, the reason why we're doing the scheme is to reduce the risk. So our map on the left here, let me put a better pointer on, get a laser pointer, can't I? Yes, there we go. This map on the left is showing our flood extents in what we call a 1 in 100 year flood, which as engineers and hydrologists, we like to use statistics to try and confuse people mainly, but that's about a flood that's got a 1 in 100 chance of occurring in any year. And we've got large areas that flood, and basically with the scheme in place is our map on the right there, and showing quite a significant reduction in risk. So it's trying to reduce the risk to a lot of properties around here, and also down through the city centre itself here. And all this is, it might look a bit strange that all this area is flood, but that is how the city was designed, how the city was built. For those who know Salisbury, there's various streets that have names like New Canal and the like. And basically the city layout was designed, the river was moved to one side, so that water would come off the river at the top end of the city, flow through all the streets, which were all open sewers, wash all the sewage through, and then back out the river at the bottom end. And that's why the flood maps look like that and sort of replicate that. But with the scheme in place, a significant reduction. But it's not just about that. We have and various other organisations have a whole load, or did have a whole load of old assets through Salisbury that are there historically for lots of just sort of water level management reasons, that are either were in poor condition, or weren't really needed, or were causing issues in terms of environmental impacts and things as well. Which brings us to one of the key reasons for wanting to do the work there. And as Claire will know, anyone else who knows in Salisbury, they're phenomenally lucky to live next to the rivers that there are in Salisbury. These chalk streams that we've got here, say on there's only 200 of them in the entire world. Last week, someone corrected me and said there's 250, but okay, there's not many in the entire world. And they're phenomenally important in terms of the species they support. The flora and fauna within them are amazing. You just don't get to see in too many other places. And as an organisation, we've done, along with various other organisations, we've done lots of work to improve the river upstream and downstream of Salisbury and various other places, but would always put the bit in the urban area in the too hard basket, and hadn't really done much on it for a while, and knew it was neglected and needed work, but didn't have a decent reason to do it. So yeah, back to environmentally. Obviously, there's a lot of species that live within the river. One of the big poster boys for it is the Atlantic salmon there. So we get the salmon come up in there, obviously live out their lives out at sea, come back to the river they were born in to spawn. Happened just a couple of weeks ago, we think, probably up on the rivers here. And they do that throughout Salisbury. But there were various structures. That photo on the left was a big sluice gate we had in the centre of Salisbury. Great engineering structure, worked perfectly, but a complete barrier to fish. They witnessed salmon and other fish coming up there and just throwing themselves against it, and then having to give up and spawn further downstream. So one of the key aspects of the job was to remove as many barriers to fish passage as we could, enable fish to be able to migrate further upstream to where they want to get to, into the headwaters of the river. About so many other wildlife as well. Very fortunate to have lots of other important wildlife there. The otters. Before doing this job, I mean, I've spent a lot of time trying to see otters and normally failing. I've almost got bored of seeing otters. We've seen them so much in Salisbury. They're there all the time. It's amazing. If you want to come and see otters, it's a great place to do it. Just get there first thing in the morning, and you'll see them most days. So, but there's another key reason why we're doing work. We got to end up doing work here, and that was due to the joys of Novichok. So the Salisbury poisonings that happened. And quite frankly, if they hadn't happened, we wouldn't have done Salisbury River Park. So we started looking at the scheme. We had a bit of an idea. We went to the Wiltshire Council with a bit of an idea there, and we sort of started throwing things around, but didn't really have the funding to do much. And then as a result of Novichok poisoning, quite a lot of funding did come into Salisbury. I mean, Salisbury was decimated by it. It was awful impacts that it had, but it did bring significant amount of funding. and through that, various initiatives were developed. One of the key ones being through this what's called Salisbury Central Area Framework, developed with the councils. One of the key elements of that was this idea of creating a river park, effectively. And this was effectively just, excuse me a second. Basic idea of creating a new linear green park that would connect up existing green spaces, create new green spaces, and create a big sort of green lung through the city centre. All right, fantastic. We'll get on board with that. And so the main project was born really at that stage. So by, as the Environment Agency, if we were just looking to do work on our own, there's a sort of limited extent to which we can use our funding to do things. We can build fences, we can do a bit of environmental improvements, we can do ecological work. But by getting on board with the councils and doing something jointly, it meant we could achieve so much more. So this is sort of demonstrating that we're able to look at amenity improvements, something normally we wouldn't be able to do. But by joining up together, pooling our resources, pooling our funding, meant that we could introduce various other bits of work that we wouldn't have done before. So footpath improvements, cycle path improvements, play areas, all that kind of things as well that we wouldn't normally be able to do. So onto the scheme itself. So I realise there's a bit of a quick bit through there, but this is just trying to show what we've been doing there. So there's various areas to the scheme, two sort of key areas, and I'm starting at the upstream end of it. Basically, got the River Avon that runs through here at the moment. And before we started work, this was a fairly bland bit of a green space here, fairly underused. It's a former sort of basically bit of a landfill site in a way. We've got lots of issues with flooding to properties around here and further up here. So we needed to build a little flood bund around the edge there, but went to the public early on as to what can we do in this area. And there was a real, fair play to the residents of Salisbury. There was a real play to try and naturalise this area, try and maximise the environmental offering that we could through here. And we're like, well, fantastic, we'll give that a go. So there's a stream that comes off the River Avon further up the top there called Summerlock Stream. That just came off the River Avon further before we started, and now we've moved it so that it comes off the river much further upstream, and we've created this whole new wetland area, well, river channel, complete with wetland area, wet woodland area, all through here, excavated out all of this area here, and with a huge amount of planting down through here, and then created new footpaths through here, new boardwalks, everything in here. To enable access, closer access to the river, but also to sort of improve this area environmentally, allow for a lot more species to get in there. This big water vole habitat further up here, so this will be a big prime area for the water voles to expand into a bit further. This is just showing it as it looks now. We haven't quite finished. We're fair to say it's been a challenging 2 years of construction. Just over 2 years now we've been trying to work there, and it's 2.5 years, and it's been in the sort of 30 years I've been doing construction, it's probably been the worst couple of years I've had in terms of weather and other things for doing a construction project, but we're almost there. We just haven't quite finished some of our landscaping work. But this shows some of the boardwalks areas we've got across the wetland area. Obviously, at the moment, all the areas are fairly full with water. In the summer, this will drain down to a much lower level here, and there's a lot of planting that will appear in here, and will take over this area significantly over the next few years. Just showing some of the boardwalks there before we open to the public just at Christmas time. So these are literally just only been open to the public now for a few weeks, but already really well used, and enabling people to get close to the environment here. And we're hoping we'll become a good sort of educational resource through here as well. We've got various information boards, and we're producing packs of information to enable schools to have sort of trips here and stuff, and to be able to better understand the area through here as well. But also lots of footpaths. So we've done a lot of this is about active travel improvements as well. So we've been putting in there's segregated footpath and cycle paths throughout there. We haven't quite got the final surfacing on that one there, but it's almost done. And that's throughout the scheme. We've been able to do that, which has been great to improve that aspect of life as part of the project. Got a big games area going in, so that's got basketball, hoop, football court, everything there as well, little climbing wall. But even we worked with local schools on this as well, especially local secondary schools, and with different groups of girls, especially in terms of what girls want from outside space and making spaces safe for women and things. So there's a lot else here than just the usual football pitches and stuff there. Through to the other part of Ashley Road here, so we were just over to the right. Now moved on a little bit further through. Not so much happening in this area here. This is what's called Ashley Road Open Space. We've got a big flood bund that runs all the way along at the front here, which has been built. And again, one of the key reasons we were keen on doing the wetland area and stuff on the other side was by excavating out that material, gave us the material we needed to build our flood bund. So minimise the amount of material going on and off site, which is where your real carbon impacts tend to come from site work like this. But we've kept this space as open as we can through here, but still a lot of planting. So we've got a huge amount of plants, lines of trees going in on either side. We're planting well over 1,000 trees, 1,000 sort of more significant trees, alongside something like 20,000 smaller sort of marginal plants and saplings in there as well. And again, showing the segregated paths that we've got in through here as well. Also a big all signal, you'll be pleased to know, big all signal dancing play area through here, which had wonderful fun working with local primary schools and stuff and on the design of this. And it's all themed around a watervole burrow. So all this climbing feature has all the same aspects that a watervole burrow has in terms of a lounge and little dining area, and the sleeping quarters and stuff within it. So it's similar from that. On the vague hope that children will be learning about watervoles as they climb around. We'll see. But excuse me again. This is down the other part of the site. That's what Claire was just sort of describing earlier. So before we started work here, this is in Central Car Park. This was basically one big car park in this area, a little channel that ran around here in a little way, very constrained, tarmacked right up to its banks, in poor condition. A lot of people didn't even know it was there. Very little left in terms of wildlife within it, unfortunately. And at the start of the project, we went to Wiltshire Council and said, you know what, would you give us 50 metres of your car park to turn into a green park? Expecting them to say no, and unbelievably they said yes. And so we were able to take out all a large area of tarmac car park, and this is basically all this extent here is all in the process of becoming a green park, and it still looks a bit brown in a lot of these places on the photos there. There's a lot more planting happened since this last photo was taken. And we've still got a fair amount of car park left. In a way, I'd quite like to have taken out all of the car park, but wasn't quite permitted that one at the time. But a lot happening there, and as Claire mentioned before we started, we had that sluice gate I showed was at the top there. And so one of the key parts of the project was taking out that gate and replacing it with these series of weirs, little rock weirs down here, which take out that drop in water level over a much longer reach. And crucially, all of these are passable to fish. So a lot of time is spent in designing those and building those to make sure that fish can navigate their way up and down through those. It shows them in a bit more detail. These are weirs with a bit more flow over them. If I haven't really seen them yet with low flow over them, hopefully this summer we might actually have a bit of low flow and see them a bit better. But lots of areas of this. Again, this was another little car park before we started. And we're able to take all that out and create this sort of pocket park place for people to use. It's right next to the coach park, the main sort of tourist arrive in Salisbury, so good for them to be able to use, but for others as well. And again, a lot of planting got in through this. So this is up at the side here. We've got a whole hedgerow going in as part of this. yeah, a large amount of planting through there, different benches and information boards, and again a segregated footpath and cycle paths through here as well. So one of the bits I'm particularly keen on, really enjoyed doing. We rebuilt the coach park that was there. I don't know if anyone who knows Salisbury knew the coach park. It wasn't a particularly pleasant experience to ever use the coach park there. And again, by working together with the councils, again, we wouldn't normally look at coach parks, but by working with the councils, they're keen to improve the coach park. So a lot's been done to make it a safer and nicer place for people to arrive. But also, as part of it, we were like, well, okay, let's address drainage and pollution issues as well. So this is in the middle of the coach park is this really big, what we call rain garden. So all the drainage, there aren't any gullies or anything within the coach park. All the runoff from the coach park ends up in this area in here. You can see this is taken after some very heavy rainfall to show it. And there's sort of very permeable soil in here and particular plants in here which provide natural treatment to the water, to any sort of pollutants within the water, and the water naturally then infiltrates down within here, and then there's a perforated drain underneath here that then takes the water then back to the river after it's had a sort of natural filter effectively through these areas. So it's something we should do so much more of, and so much easier to look after and maintain than traditional gullies and sewers. Just showing the area a bit at night there, just showing all the paths and stuff being used and the new bridges and stuff has been done as part of the scheme. And again, a few more extra bits just to show the extent of works there. One of the things we've also been able to do as part of this that I don't normally get to do is have an public arts programme as part of this, which has been fantastic, a really great experience to do. This is just showing one of the things we got various local artists involved to do various bits of work, whether they were sort of physical works or running workshops or producing bits of music. It's all been done as part of it, and this was one particular thing where we had a toilet block there, which conveniently had 5 sides. As Claire says, everything in Salisbury has 5 elements of something. So we had 5 sides. So we named each side after a different river, and had an street artist called Tech Moon, who painted all these things based on just using spray cans. Absolutely phenomenal. Anyone who's seen them there, but have been really good in terms of educating people as well about what's in the river. It's amazing the amount of times I've gone into schools or other groups to try and talk to them about kingfishers. They wouldn't be interested, but paint a kingfish from a wall and all of a sudden people are keen to know more. So it's been really really good experience, something to do and something we're keen to do on future projects. Seeing another of the toilet blocks as well, which leads me to one of my favourite stories I have about this scheme, and that normally I avoid social media because I don't want to know what people are saying about me. It's normally fairly abusive, so I avoid it. But someone made me read one bit article, which when we did this toilet block again, nice, got 5 doors, so for the 5 rivers. And we've got it painted by a local artist with all various different animals that live in the river around here. And someone criticised us hugely on the local media for saying, well, why have you done this? What a waste of money. Why have you painted fish on here? We're nowhere near the sea. We went, yes. Well, that's why we've painted it, to try and educate people there are actually fish in rivers, believe it or not. So good experience. There's other bits of art around the site as well. I realised I wanted to talk a bit about other areas and other bits of areas that flood. Obviously, there's lots of similar places to Salisbury within the rest of Wiltshire where we have lots of issues with flooding here, and certainly things we're looking to do. In fact, I'm now working on a scheme in Chippenham that's going to be a fairly basic Salisbury Mark II, and what we're trying to look at now on the back of relative success of Salisbury is this opportunities of working together more, and it is the way to try and achieve better objectives. Really, I think it's something we've, especially as public sector organisations, we've tended to work in silos a bit too much, and that just doesn't get us far enough. And by working together through various different organisations, gives us this opportunity to deliver so much more, and certainly to deliver more for the environment, and access the sort of funding that we couldn't do otherwise. But there's still a lot of challenges to doing this, especially in terms of funding and keeping the funding there. I dream of the day when there is actually sufficient funding available to do environmental work in all these areas. We still predominantly will get money for projects based purely on the properties protected from flooding, rather than necessarily the improvements to fish passage or that kind of thing. But it's improving. And there's certainly a lot that can be done, and a lot of sites we're keen to look at and explore further throughout Wiltshire and further afield. So I think that's me for the moment. I think if I just scroll through, yeah, that was just me. I realise that's a bit of a short tour, but that's 25 minutes, just about kept there. But I hope. Hopefully there's a few questions, and we can start to go into a few bits of there in a bit more detail if people like, or more than happy to drone on about something else.
Well, I can see hands up already, but I can I just say I was one of the aspects that is really interesting is what we have now in Salisbury because of Novichok. You know, should we ever welcomed it as a blessing? So maybe there was a blessing that came with it. So, but anyway, Mel wants to ask a question. So, Mel, would you like to fire away?
Hi, that was fascinating. Thank you. I just wondered, it's probably too early, but there's a proposed sort of heart of Wessex region to be created, including Wiltshire, Dorset, and
Somerset.
Somerset, correct. Is that going to help you work better together, do you think, and create more funding, or is it too early to say?
I hope it will. Well, going back in history, let's start a bit before. To do all these projects, what we always relied on, going back far enough, was EU funding. EU funding was always our first port of call for these. People don't think quite realised what the EU actually funded. But and then after that, it was what we called the LEPs, which are local enterprise partnerships, and they were really keen on funding this. Again, those have now disappeared. It is these then sort of devolution parties which tend to have the funding to deliver these sort of projects. And I reference that by the fact I do various works over in sort of Bath, Bristol way, which is part of West of England Combined Authority. So I went to devolution a little while ago, and have better access to that funding. So certainly in terms of funding, I think it will help us work it will help projects like this a lot. In terms of working together, I'm interested to see how it goes. It's a hell of an area to try and cover in one sort of devolved area, and I'm not obviously in my role. I'm not political, but I think it's going to be an interesting time.
Thank you, Andy. Julian, you've got a question.
Thanks. Yes, a couple of little ones. You mentioned about the 1 in 100 years flooding and the last one in 2015. I mean, what is the
1915? Yeah,
1915. Sorry.
Yeah.
What is the sort of probability now of what used to be 1 in 100 year flood? And also, in your work, is there any significant thing you can do in terms of carbon sequestration, or is that not really a significant thing that you can do as part of these projects?
Yeah, so let's do the flooding first, and I'll try and keep this brief. So yes, with climate change, is flooding going to get worse or better to Salisbury? And this is the question, because all the historic flood events, all the really big flood events, so 1915 and the flood events we got before then, all occur when you get a very heavy snowfall on Salisbury Plains, followed by a rapid thaw. And that is the worst case for flooding in these areas, because these are normally sort of chalk catchments, fairly permeable catchments. Are we going to get those kind of events as much anymore? Are we going to get those really heavy snowfall events? We haven't for a long time now. Debatable. certainly the sort of flooding that's seen in 1915, you couldn't get just from rainfall on its own. You have to have either a completely frozen catchment or heavy snowfall. So it's quite frankly, I can't answer that unless we resume this conversation in about 500 years' time and see what we've got there. But certainly in terms of the more frequent flooding, we know that's happening a lot more frequently at the moment. But the more extreme flooding, difficult one to tell. Carbon sequestration, really interesting. I mean, certainly in terms of so there's, in terms of creating wet woodlands area, in terms of the planting that's going on there, in terms of making sure we keep areas wet where we can. That's very good for it. Obviously, the planting that's going on there, slightly different. We've not got peat or anything here to worry about on that side of things. But certainly through all the things we can do with planting on this one, we have to do carbon calculations throughout all of this to make sure we're demonstrate that we've got the sort of reduction in carbon that we're doing through it. Obviously, the biggest carbon impact comes from flood events, and the astonishing amount of carbon that comes from during flood events and the clear up after it. We didn't quite answer your question fully, but a lot is done to assess the carbon and also make sure we're doing as low carbon impacts, low carbon work through there as possible.
Thank you. Yes, I noticed it looked like you were using wood for some of those structures.
We do so like all the boardwalks are wood. For example, we use a lot of wood where we can through there. We minimise. It's a fortunate project in a way that we were able to minimise the amount of concrete, excluding one big road bridge, which we had no choice about. Everything else, there's a limited amount of concrete or steel throughout projects like this. So your main carbon cost actually comes from the earthworks you're doing there as well, which we tried to minimise.
Right, thank you. Bill is next.
Yeah, hi. So, yeah, Julian's bought a couple of the ones I was going to ask anyway, but I would come back to the rainfall. The climate change is going to increase rainfall in this country. It already does, already has started to, and there were some incredibly devastating heavy weather events in Europe, Germany particularly this year, and then obviously saw Spain.
Yeah.
Spain, I think, was completely different from Germany, and Germany is more like where we are here in terms of how it hit the river, and there were incredible floods everywhere there. Now, you're saying it's a very permeable landscape. Do you genuinely believe that there's nothing going to change in the next 20, 30 years, that it's going to nothing's going to hit this?
Oh no, that is sorry. No, let me clarify that. Definitely, that's not what I meant by that. In terms of we're seeing it constantly in terms of the increased rainfall, in terms of and I'd say also increased drought is actually our in some ways as much of a concern for this catchment, possibly even a bigger concern for this catchment, the impacts of climate change on drought periods. Not that we've had one of those for a couple of years. But certainly in terms of increased rainfall, we're seeing that more, and certainly seeing the increase in more frequent flooding happening on this catchment and on sort of more different types of catchment. The increased rainfall has a different effect in different areas. So certainly on some of the less permeable catchments, the extreme flooding is even getting a lot worse. In this case, we are sort of the jury is out as to whether the most extreme flooding will get worse or not with it, because while the rainfall might be increasing, the amount of time that the catchment is frozen is decreasing, and the amount of time the heavy snowfall we get is decreasing. So whether that will play out over a longer period or not, we don't know, but certainly we know that the flows we're getting through on a regular basis are significantly more and increasing all the time, unfortunately.
Okay, so they're still designed for an old-fashioned 100-year flood because you think it's actually going to be okay?
Yeah, I mean we've designed for the standard sort of varies a bit throughout the scheme, but generally we've designed especially the embankments for a 1 in 100 event with a significant allowance for climate change on top of that as well.
Okay.
So that's all factored into there.
Yeah.
But clearly there could be an event in excess of that. There will be. So we always have to be careful to say we haven't eliminated flooding from these areas of Salisbury. We've merely just reduced the risk.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next question. I've got loads of questions. I'll try to keep going through as much as I can. Get to the next one. On the I'm an engineer, so I'm interested in a couple of things here. One, the two things. One, on the contract, when you that's what you've done there is incredible in terms of changing things, and you described one area is really difficult to deal with, and it had major challenges. How was that designed into the contract, and who took the risk on it? And what was the capital works cost initially, and what was the outturn cost? And I'm interested for two reasons. One, because I'm an engineer, and two, because if we push for things like this elsewhere, and they point at Salisbury and say, well, they had to spend twice as much as they thought they were going to do, at least we know that's going to come. But I'm just interested in how you had number of funding streams. Somebody must have been managing that. How did all the structure of that work? And how did you get the additional money which you must have needed to do all of the problems and the major issues?
Yeah, absolutely. We could have an hour-long talk on this. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the contracts, I mean, we use NEC target cost contracts with our suppliers. So we have target cost with risk allowances in there for everything, and depending on the risk, it's either a contractor holds the risk or we as client hold the risk. The majority of the risk sits with the contractor there, yeah, that's get into a lot of detail on how that's managed and stuff. We obviously very tightly manage that. We have a suite of the project managers, the supervisors and stuff on site, making sure that things are delivered as they can. In terms of costs, now, and let me get to the end of this sentence before you're full of seat. We started off with a cost of about, I think it was about 28 million, something like that, for it. And we're going to end up as a final cost of about 45. Now, before we get into too much, there was quite a lot of extra scope that was added to the project as we went through. So, for example, that coach park that I showed there, that wasn't included in the original project. We weren't going to do that. So various things were added through there. But we've still probably gained cost to the best part of 10 million as the project's gone on. Now, the primary reason for that is inflation. So we've done this obviously while the war was going on in Ukraine. Before we started, most of the steel you used for construction projects in this country tended to come from a steel works in Mariupol in Ukraine. And the cost of steel and concrete has just been ridiculous. So at one point through this project, we were running at inflation costs of 10% a month, or a month. So there's various things. I mean, fortunately, we were a bit more immune than some other projects were to increases in cost because we didn't have so much steel and concrete. But there's a big road bridge we did as part of this, and that tripled in cost, just purely on the cost of materials, not of anything else. So that's where our main change came. Then we had various issues. Obviously, weather has really hit us bad. We had a lot more contamination than we were expecting to have to deal with as well, which was the extra cost. But overall, yeah, it was a significant cost. I know, and you get 45 million sounds like a lot of money. I mean, in terms of engineering schemes, it's medium size. It's not vast. It's a lot bigger than that. And we were able to demonstrate still that it's still exceptionally good value for money in terms of the public purse, in terms of how these things are worked out through Treasury funding rules. So even when we went over budget, we were still able to obtain more funding to fill the gap based on it still being a good value for money rather than having to cut back on the design of the project. But again, that was fortunate by being able to, at each stage, being able to get additional funding from other sources rather than just from our own source, which wouldn't have funded everything.
So you had fundraisers working with you all the time, by the sound of it.
Well, yeah, I mean that was one of my main roles, unfortunately, as a sort of part of the project, is to try and locate the funding. So yeah, we do have people, but again, that's by working jointly with the councils. That gives us that opportunity to attract funding that they can do that we wouldn't be able to apply for.
Okay, so final question for you, because I've got those more, but I'll stay on. Who maintains all of this in the future?
Good question. And yeah, this is my sort of mantra on schemes like this: is you'll be judged. We can make them look as shiny as we like when we finish the site, but you'll be judged on what they look like 5-10 years into the future. So in this case, we have to make sure when we're costing a scheme and designing it that we cost it for what's called the whole life of it. So it's not just for the actual construction side of it; it's for the ongoing maintenance and future demolition if it's required of it, and that's all costed for and cost assigned to there. And effectively, by getting that additional cost into the project budget, we were then able to pass on a significant sum of money, in this case to Salisbury City Council, to get them to take on the maintenance of the scheme. And by doing it that way, there is actually a legal agreement in place, called Section 106 agreement through the planning process, that basically sets in what the maintenance is required, and the funding to do it is passed over, and that's funding we've given them effectively funding for the next 50 years to maintain the scheme, and there's a sort of legal requirement to actually do that. Otherwise, we ask for the money back.
Okay, so this funding effectively is ring-fenced in the contract.
Absolutely.
To do just that and nothing else.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Sue, you've been waiting. Sue, could you unmute?
Hello, sorry for the delay. Got there. Yeah, thank you. Mine's a rather specific question. It's about the river flows in the top stream at the central car park, the mill stream, the top stream. They don't seem to be high enough to me. And we were lucky that we had quite a wet summer, because there might be some danger of it drying up completely in the summer, and it looked ugly enough anyway, because of course when the streams, when the levels fall, it's not very nice for people to look at. And if it dried up completely, it would be really, really ugly and horrible.
Really good question. So basically within the central car park area, there's 3 water courses, but there's 2 main ones: the River Avon and the Mill Stream, down through there. And it's the Avon where we put the extra weirs in and did things there. Now with the Mill Stream, I mean, it won't dry out because there's weirs, things at the bottom end that effectively hold the water level up. There'll always be a certain depth of water in there. But that is less than what we had before we started the scheme, and that is deliberate. So before we started the works, we always prioritised put quite a lot of flow down the mill stream rather than down the River Avon, because the mill stream was the only channel that fish would be able to get up. Even though it was a pretty poor fish pass at the bottom of it, it was the only one there, and fish are always attracted to the aerated flow, the busiest sort of flow through there. So we always had more flow through that. With the scheme in place, we're putting more flow now down the River Avon channel and less down the mill stream, deliberately because we want fish to be attracted to come up the Avon channel rather than the mill stream. So we've reduced the flow down through there. What we've done to sort of counteract that as well is to narrow the channel down through there. So we put a lot of stone, put in these stone berms down throughout the channel there, to narrow the channel to make sure that it's got low flows, it's got the right width it needs, and still able to flow at the right speed it needs to naturally scour out the beds and keep the gravels there nice and clean and not silting up there. So it won't reduce. So it is different to what it was before, and that is deliberate. That is all planned, and we've done works on the structures at the end to make sure that at the Bishop's Mill there as well, to make sure that the water levels will stay as they are. But that will vegetate on the banks there quite a bit as well. But that is, it was deliberate to help the ecology through there. And one of the things through there. So we created all those stone berms down there. One of the things we didn't really anticipate through that is how much the otters love running up and down them. So we're constantly having the otters there. And I've been lucky enough to see the otter with its kits up and down those berms as well in the evening. So well used. But
okay, thanks.
And perhaps I could ask a question following on from that, Andy, which is that a while ago, and this really fans out to a wider issue about competing communities, if you like, where you have a river catchment. I'm trying to think how long ago it was, 7, 8 years ago, where there was a lot of flooding in Downton, and the people in Downton were blaming what was happening up here in Salisbury and saying that, we'd opened all our gates and whoosh, it all gone down there. We were saying that down in Downton, they hadn't been cleared out their channels for many a long year. And I think that is an issue generally with schemes or changes. And I must declare an interest. I have some friends in Downton with a very nice swing by the river, which you can go and sit in. Is that going to be washed away? Am I going to be able to carry on swinging away by the river? So when you do work, there must be knock-ons, both perhaps backing up and going down to our sea, which is not very far away, is it?
No, is actually the answer, and they can't be. We can't increase flood risk to other people without their consent. So we can't do a scheme, however good it might be at reducing risk in their area, if it increased risk somewhere else. So the water coming into Salisbury pretty much comes out the bottom of Salisbury. We don't actually make a difference. So even at the cathedral, we don't actually, this scheme isn't about reducing flood risk to the cathedral. It doesn't actually have that much of an impact to the cathedral itself, because by that point you've got all the other watercourses is coming in there as well. So and you're right, we get this all the time, especially when places like Britford or just downstream of Salisbury flood. It's always because, well, you must have opened a gate somewhere. It's impossible. That's not how physics works. You can't do that. It doesn't have that impact. We can't suddenly release volumes of water. That's not how the rivers work. So there is no impact downstream from what we're doing at all. There is a short impact upstream. You build a bit of a flood bund and it has a bit of an impact upstream. So some of the fields upstream of Salisbury, we increase the risk to slightly, but not to any properties up there. So by the time it gets to properties, we've had to ensure that there's no increase in risk, and we have to demonstrate that through the planning process to ensure that it isn't the case. But we constantly get that. I live on the Bristol Avon, and every time that floods, it's because we open some gates up at the top end and close them at the bottom end, and deliberately flooded everywhere in between. And no, it's that's not how physics works. It's not how water flows. It's not actually possible. But it will always be said.
I suppose what I was getting at was whether it would enable, for example, where Avon Bridge is, and there's the gate there, because there's the Great Lake of Avon Bridge. Whether that will that seems to be less flooded than I perhaps would have expected this winter.
Yeah, it won't have that much of impact. That's just how it happens to have been from one winter to the next, based on flows and vegetation in different areas and stuff. But I can't comment on that area exactly, but it won't be anything to do with the scheme. We've done whatever was there would have been the same this winter, whether or not we'd done the scheme or not.
And the people who were evacuated from Ashley Road,
yes.
If I met someone from Ashley Road, perhaps would I be able to say to them, "Look, guys, this isn't going to happen to you again"? Are you confident that won't happen to them again?
We can't ever say it won't ever happen again. But the key bit was if the event. So we had the event in, and one of your worst nightmares doing schemes like this is you get a big flood event halfway through the scheme, and we had about 7 or 8 properties that flooded on Ashley Road. If we hadn't been doing any of the works at all, we'd probably had about 50 flooded. So in a way, it was good that it was only 7 or 8. One of those still hasn't even moved back in, so over a year now, just over a year, and they still haven't been able to move back into their home. We can say if that event was to occur again, they wouldn't flood. So the same event they had last January, we can say that, we know we have said that, and we can, that's the prime reason we're doing the scheme. There could always be an event significantly bigger than that in the future, something bigger than the 1 in 100 event, and they might flood, so we can't ever say they won't have a flood, but we are significantly reducing their risk.
Okay, thank you. Right, do we have more questions? I'm not sure.
Well, I'll ask a quick one, but related to that then. So
there was somebody else, but I think they've disappeared. Wasn't you, John, was it? Anyway, carry on, Bill.
No, I'm just thinking about insurance, and if I'm in Ashley Road now, will my insurance company be very happy that they're now being protected, or will, as they got flooded quite recently, the insurance premiums will stay very high?
Yes, joys of insurance companies. They, in theory, and certainly the information we'll be providing to the insurance companies will show that they benefit from flood defences and so have a reduced risk. Whether the insurance companies choose to take any notice of that, unfortunately, is up to them. And once the property has been flooded, then they will find that their premium is increased. But we do find by shopping around and using the right systems for this, they can get a reduction in premium. But it is sadly, it is still a problem.
How quickly are the flood maps adjusted if you do a scheme like this?
Right, normally quite quick. So normally, we've reproduced all our flood maps at the moment based on the scheme. So we have to wait till we've got partway through construction, so we've got enough information through it, and produce the maps, and then they're available. And they are available now. We've got revised maps available if people asked for them. Unfortunately, we're just going through a process of completely changing all the flood maps that are online in the system for it that's online at the moment, and that means there's an embargo in terms of putting any updates on there for another, I think it's another 6 months or something. So in the case of Salisbury, unfortunately, they're not going to see a change in the online maps for another best part of at least 6 months, possibly almost a year from now, unfortunately. But that's a slightly unique case. Normally it would happen a lot quicker after it. But if anyone downloads the data from it soon, it will state on it, contact us for more information. These maps are out of date, kind of thing.
It's not just your insurance, is it? It's actually if you're selling your property.
Yeah.
People, I think there's a massively increased. I've got a family member just buying, and I'm pouring over the flood map with, vigilance. So I think there's a general vigilance now, isn't there, for people to be able to sell at all? Because you're not even going to go to the insurance point. You're going to look at the flood map and say, I'm not interested. I'm not even going to go there.
Absolutely, but you have to be very very careful with these things. In one, people see them as very black and white. You'll see a line, and well, I'm just outside that blue line, therefore I'm fine. And you think it should be a sort of nice sort of graded scale. And also, I can't remember what the exact statistic is, but it's something like 2/3 of flooding happens outside the flood zones maps that are shown, because it's be from little bits of field runoff or highway flooding that people don't know about from there. So
and I suppose we've got an increased incidence of sort of sudden intense cloudbursts in one particular place. I've noticed that particularly recently, that I'll go just a mile away and we've had a cloudburst, or vice versa, and there's no rain, or there's masses of rain, all in a very localized small area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've broken various records over the past. I went through the first 20 or so years of my career with always harking back to the 60s as well, and all our sort of rainfall records were broken, and then we've pretty much over the last 10 years then broken them all in terms of the intensity of rainfall we get in this country. Again, nothing compared to what we've had in some other countries. Still, we've been a bit lucky in a way, but yeah, it is, especially those sort of summer storms, sort of intense storms. That's one of the key things we're sort of seeing as an impact from climate change, seeing those being much more prevalent through there, and they can have a lot of impact. So, you know, someone like Salisbury doesn't need to worry so much about in terms of the rivers, about a short-term storm. What it worries about is 3 months of constant rainfall. But equally, a little valley, more steeper river somewhere, that will be critical for it. So it's understanding what's important for different areas, and trying to plan for it.
John, you've got a question. I think this will be the last one, perhaps.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a question about features that you're building in, Andy, for wildlife. You've talked about the weirs for fish, which should be great. And early on, you showed pictures of bats and birds and things like that.
Yes.
And I also saw a picture of a car park with loads of lights in it.
Yes.
I just wondered, could you say a little bit more about the features that you've built in that may attract more wildlife into the city?
Yeah, brilliant. So well, let's talk about light very quickly first of all, because it's always one of the biggest challenges on schemes like this. In that when I go to public meetings, I'll have half the room telling me to keep the area as dark as possible, and the other half telling me to keep it as light as possible. And trying to find a midway path through that. So we do a huge amount of lighting modelling as part of this to ensure. So although there are quite a few lights in there, and certainly we've been putting lights in on all our footpaths, the main footpaths in the car park area there. They're all very cleverly designed nowadays to ensure that there is no light spill beyond the path there. So we have to ensure all the river corridors are dark. There's no lighting on the bridges, for example, that go over the rivers. So we've got dark corridors through there. Really important for so many aspects of wildlife through there. Obviously, we've got a lot of trees going in, a lot of planting in there for wildlife. We've got various back boxes, things going in there. We did have a long conversation about putting in Swift towers and stuff, so that didn't actually happen in the end at this stage, because the Swifts aren't close enough yet in the area that it would have been too effective. But I hope that's something that can be introduced in the future. And obviously, putting in a lot of the sort of smaller planting in there and the wet areas there is about trying to attract the insects and stuff in there as well. That we need to attract the bird life, etc., through there as well. And in terms of the mammals there, we did a lot of work on the banks there. The other challenge, biggest challenge other than light, is all about public access. And again, I'll have half the room telling me that rivers are for wildlife, not for people, and the other half saying people need to be able to enjoy rivers. And the way it's always a compromise position, and through that car park area, what we've done there is on one bank of the river, it's all fairly densely planted. There are no footpaths, there's no public access into it at all. That's not to say that people might find their way into it eventually, but you'd have to try quite hard. Whereas on the other bank, while there's a lot of planting, there is public access through there. So we're trying to keep a sort of consistent consistent corridor down alongside the river that is for wildlife really, rather than for people through there. So all that aspect of it, we've created little beach areas alongside the river in places to encourage those to be the area where people allow their dogs into the river, for example, because that's what has one of the biggest impacts especially on the fish spawning areas. So hopefully by keeping that sort of damage to a smaller area enables the other areas to flourish alongside them. So a lot's done, and that's without even talking about what we've done for waterfalls, which I could go on for a long time.
Very much.
Right. Andy, can you just take Jackie's question? I'm aware we're past 7 o'clock.
Yeah. No problem.
No problem. You're not rushing.
No,
Jackie,
no.
far away.
Bless you. Thank you. From one extreme to another, I'm in Market Lavington, which is a village under the plain.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of my sins, I'm looking at developing the flood management plan.
Okay. Well done.
And we have not only do we have a river or a stream going through the village, we have noticed over the last few years that we have many more springs coming up.
Yeah.
Obviously they may be old springs, but they are appearing, haven't been around for quite a few years, and now they're becoming very obvious. And our own personal home is up on a sort of quite well up a hill on green sand, and we now seem to be permanently waterlogged, as if the water table is considerably higher than it's been in the 20 years we've lived here, and that's over the last 3 years. So and we're about to have to build at least another 50 or 60 houses to meet our requirement.
Yes.
So if we build them on the top of the hill, then obviously we'll probably get more runoff. But if we build them in the valley, then they're going to get flooded. So thoughts, please.
Oh, crikey.
I'd love to have a river park, but I would have in a smallish area, but I don't know how much of an effect that will actually have on managing water through the village.
Yeah, it can have a bit of impact. I mean, going back to your the springs, everything that, I mean, it is in terms of, because we monitor the groundwater levels all the time through the Salisbury Plains, because it really, especially in terms of Salisbury flooding, for example, Salisbury doesn't flood when groundwater levels are low. It's almost the groundwater level is almost more important than the rainfall that occurs. In a way, you need the combination of the two, obviously. But the groundwater levels, when we started back in 2022, we were in drought conditions, and everything, the springs hadn't sprung for several years. It had all been really quite quiet, and then the rainfall we had through 2023 into 2024 was just so exceptional in terms of the groundwater levels were so high. And then, but what normally happens is that they have a sort of annual sort of cycle where your groundwater levels start to rise in sort of November time, and they peak in about February, March, and then recede down to a low in sort of August, September time, and then going back up again. And it happens fairly usual. In the last year, they barely went down. So even in the summer, we still had really high groundwater levels. So they've gone down a bit, but not a lot, which meant that by the time this winter came, and then we only needed the heavy rain we had in September, and the groundwater levels were shooting up to really high levels, something we just don't expect to see till December. It happened, sort of 3 months earlier than we were expecting. So what you're seeing is classic of what we're seeing everywhere else as well. That the springs, the groundwater levels are just at that much higher level than we'd hope, we'd expect for this through the last year. Hopefully, we'll have a nice dry year next year, and they'll go back to something normal. But if we get another wet year, then that'll be interesting. In terms of development of houses, obviously it'd be a tricky one. We're a regulator as much as on these kind of things as well. So it's a tricky one. I mean, you can build new housing developments now that if they're done right, especially on the smaller ones, that can actually have a benefit in terms of water management, in terms of how you store water on site, in terms of how you reuse the water, almost more importantly, on there. And I wish we did more to learn from what happens in most of the European countries on that, because we can make housing so much more sustainable and so much better for water management than it is currently. As for whether you do it at the top of a hill or at the bottom of the hill, well, that's impossible to do. But I think people sometimes give housing a sort of bad name in terms of look and say, well, flooding's happened. Well, that's because we've just concreted over the countryside. If you look at most of our catchments, especially in Wiltshire, they're so rural. It's such a tiny percentage of the catchment is actually urbanised. It has very little impact. Where it does start having impact is if you've got on the sort of small watercourse we're talking about. I think I could probably guess roughly whereabouts you are. Proportionally, then putting a big area is much more significant within the catchment. But everything has to be designed with sustainable drainage stuff in there to make sure that doesn't happen.
And a bit like you said, I'm always worried about putting in drainage and sending it down to the next village along.
Well, that's what you shouldn't. Yeah, you've got to be that drainage. Drainage can be a pond. It's not just putting and that's go back to the slide I showed about with the coach park and the rain gardens. I you know, it was a Victorian system to put in pipes and stuff beneath the ground and sewers and stuff. That's you know, we've moved so much away from that. We shouldn't be doing that in a lot of areas. You should keep water above ground and store it on the sites. It has so much environmental amenity benefit, as well as avoiding the need for overwhelming treatment works and the likes as well that we do all the time. So there's a lot can be done, and sometimes a lot of the flooding problems we get in these areas, especially on your green sand catchments, comes from agricultural runoff and people who plough their fields in certain ways, and you get a lot of the issues there is because of all that, how friable that material is and all the sediment you get from it, blocking that off. And actually, with a better sort of land use, which may involve a degree of housing, actually that can sometimes be a better thing. So it's a difficult message, but sustainable ways of doing it.
I'd love if you could give Claire any references on that type of positive type of building. I'd be really, not now, but you know, if you could send it to her, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, but if you look up sort of Code for Sustainable Home stuff, and
we had a really interesting talk at the Civic Society in Salisbury, which dealt with this particular point about keeping all the water above. I'll dig that out for you, Jackie, some of those references. And one of the places this is happening is Sheffield. Did you know about this, Andy? In Sheffield, there's I can't remember what it's called, Super Sheffield or something, where you're having exterior drainage into storage areas next to car parks and all the rest of it. That was a really fascinating, because we're so used to the idea of everything going down a drain.
Absolutely,
it sort of turns everything upside on its head when you start looking at what other people are doing. It's really interesting.
If you haven't looked at them before, look up the phrase sponge cities. It's actually started in China. Believe it or not, they're actually at the forefront of a lot of this. But this is all about retrofitting areas to make them absorb water and stuff better there. Yeah, really.
Thank you very much.
Just before Bill speaks, one of the things that's gone around, I mean, it's past history now because it's been cancelled, but one of the things that has gone around a lot was that if the Stonehenge tunnel had been built, that would have created a massive barrier. You're laughing. And that our cathedral would have imminently fallen down. Was there any truth in this?
Not whatsoever. I don't know how it started, but the amount of times I would be at meetings or something, well, you're only doing this project because of Stonehenge tunnel. I began, please explain the link. It's completely different. The levels are significantly different. There,
I think the idea really was that concrete barrier would stop the water flowing, and then down in the cathedral they'd be having to get a dipstick and be looking down for where all the water had gone, but it would be all sort of spilling out left and right, going to some other place rather than into the Avon. I think that was the idea.
No, it's if you think how deep the chalk is in these areas, it's 100 meters deep or so. It's a relatively small bit of it that the tunnel blew. Plus, they had to demonstrate the impacts on groundwater flows through there. So it's water doesn't flow through every part of it. There's fissures and stuff between the different material. That's where the water sort of all flows. It's not through all obviously some of the rock. A lot of the chalk is actually pretty impermeable. You don't get water through it, but it's through all the different cracks, different joins between the different materials there. So there is no truth in that one whatsoever.
Right, Bill, and then I think
just a quick one, really. What from the project you've been talking about? What was your most satisfying moment other than finishing it?
I could easily answer that. It was the moment when we ripped out the sluice gate that was there. Having been there, and so I talked about having seen the fish sort of throw themselves at it. I've also seen eels get stuck underneath it and basically die when they're underneath it. And the moment I was able to just rip that out of the channel was a very happy moment for me. So I did enjoy that.
And have you seen lots of fish jumping up there now?
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, seen lots. I haven't yet seen the salmon up through there. I've been keeping a look. I haven't been there often enough in the past few weeks. So we will go out and do our surveys for the salmon reds, the salmon nests up there at the moment, because it's a prime area for salmon to nest up through there. So we'll have a look. But yeah, seen plenty going up through there, and you can the fact that all the various different birds are there, and the otter are there up and down. They wouldn't be there if the fish weren't there. So we're pretty sure. But we'll keep monitoring it. We have to. The joys of biodiversity net gain and other things. We have to make sure we're monitoring for a set period afterwards. So make sure these things do actually happen. But
have you sold carbon credits off it then?
We were going to, and it's yes, I could talk for another hour about biodiversity again if you like, and the challenges it's bringing as much as opportunities.
You may well come back then, because we want to talk about PNG at some point.
Oh really? Yeah, it's
in a different meeting, but we do.
Yes, it's become so complicated and so difficult, but in the end, what we thought would be a scheme that delivers a huge amount of biodiversity gain doesn't actually deliver that much as you think, and it's the way the metric works. It doesn't, like, there's nothing within the metric for benefiting fish passage, for example. So you don't score anything for that. And the fact that where we do score good is where we're removing tarmac and putting in green areas. That's good, but even where we put in the wetland area at the top, because there was already some grass there, even though it was pretty poor grass, we effectively have to account for the fact we've lost grassland habitat by increasing this. It doesn't actually score as well as you might think.
We had a talk a while ago, did we not, on the Wiley Valley?
Okay.
Which they were talking there about actually building the project through biodiversity net gain sales of credits. So whether they'll ever succeed or not, on the basis that they're not necessarily as robust in a way they can get them as they should be.
They might do. The other reason where we struggled is the disadvantage of working in partnership with people. Is what you need to be able to do biodiversity net gain is you need to have a single organisation that owns an area, is going to do the works and maintain it and sell it, because otherwise we'd have spent more in the legal agreements trying to work out whose credits they are than we would have got as benefits from.
That's an interesting point, though. I think that's really interesting point. Okay, who gets them in the end? Who gets the cash from them? Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And then who someone might, you might sell them and get the credits, but what happens if that area fails in the future? You get a drought or something, and then you can't achieve the biodiversity gain. Who actually then picks up the bill for fixing it, which you have to do? It's I don't know. I thought it was a great. I was really enthused when biodiversity net gain came in. I thought it's fantastic, and the more I've got involved in it, the less impressed I am. If I'm honest, I'm not quite sure.
And the less benefit it actually delivers in the end. And I think people is a perfect way to offset is an awesome. Really.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just become a big industry in its own right.
Thanks. Thanks for that guidance. I think that's quite interesting. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think we ought to wind up there because it's only 7:20. Can I just draw everyone's attention to something I put in the chat? You may have seen it. Because if we want to monitor what's on the Avon or anywhere else, there is this Citizen Science Showcase programme, which I've been alerted to, which is all about environmental monitoring. It's got quite a mixed range of mostly online events about water quality monitoring, all sorts of different monitoring for species and all the rest of it. So if you're interested in that, I've put it in the chat. And have a look at it. Citizen Science Showcase, if you see that in the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
So thanks everybody. Andy, I expect you want to go and do whatever you you do when you're not looking at the otters. I mean, I have to say the people have one thing I can say about the river park is everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion, from the people who are absolutely thrilled, the otters and the kingfishers and the rest of it, the people who think, why have they spent all that? What a waste of money. Why have they done it this way? Why have they done it that way? But everyone's got an opinion. So the sort of community engagement side of it, I think it shows how important that is, to try and actually explain what is happening. Because when our big, the big willows were all cut down and everything, everyone was absolutely devastated and horrified. And you have to be a salesman in your job as well as all the other things which you are. So well done.
Yeah, you do have to be thick-skinned. Yeah, I mean the biggest challenge on this project was actually the fact that we had to communicate about it during the middle of COVID pandemic, so we couldn't actually do all the sort of consultation we'd have wanted to do. I did webinar after webinar, which I would never have to do again in my life. But so it was real difficult. That was probably one of the biggest challenges of the overall project.
I'm sure. But so many stories, when you start working on areas, so many stories. I remember sitting at the bottom, talking to a guy who'd been there, telling me about the otters he'd seen, and how about when how he used to go down the river on a rubber ring, from where the old swimming pool was.
Yes.
The swimming pool near the coach park, which
it was still there. Yeah, they just buried it. We dug it out. It was still there, blue tiles and all. Yeah.
I'll have to tell my husband, because that was his swimming. They had to jump in, whatever the weather, whatever the temperature. They had to go there and jump in. So he remembers that fondly. And the river is so associated with so many memories for so many of us that all these have come out as a result of the park. So that's the
good.
sort of human side of all this being done. Yes,
that's brilliant.
Indeed. So thank you so much for giving us so much of your time.
Thank you.
No problem.
And,